Just when you thought the future sound of London's discography was beginning to get maybe a touch predictable, they mix things up once again in 2024, and for the first time in nearly 30 years released a conventional FSOL EP, Captures, and that's just one release we'll be looking at today on Earthbeat Vision's A History of the Future Sound of London. FSOLDigital presents Mind Maps 5, release date 21st of June 2024. News of the 5th volume of the remix album series leaked via Radoslav Kochman aka Sundial Aeon announcing it on Facebook in late May with a proposed date of late June. Touched Music confirmed its release and the date on the 15th May, with the usual promotional video popping up on YouTube and Facebook the day after, once again showing artist names and rolling footage of the artwork. The next remixes announced were Enofa and, excitingly, 808 State. The usual range of sounds can be found on the album, carrying on from the less playful tone of the 4th volume, with further darker melancholic sounds and some pretty heavy going material in places. We even got a new Views piece, excitingly. Running to an hour, it's a more manageable block of sound than the almost overwhelming 80 minutes of Mind Maps 4. The art shifts to a yellow tone this time, and the individual indexing and full printed tracklist continue. The result again is that this feels more like a remix album than an FSOL transmission featuring remixes. That said, the FSOLDigital originals do number 5 this time around, taking up almost a third of the runtime. The answer phone messages, meanwhile, are barely present. Either Brian got sick of them or simply ran out of unheard ones. The album was accompanied by a sister album, Trip Maps 2, and more on that soon. 808 State, Afro Makossa Yage mix. You'd be forgiven for thinking this was humanoid. Stick Brian and Graham Massey together and, unsurprisingly, you end up in acid banger territory. Lots of delay and a bunch of bizarre samples over the top keep the Yage vibe up, but this is pretty bouncy, fall to the floor acid house for the most part. The final minute halves the tempo and pitches the drums down for a slightly industrial sounding outro. Yunk's Tic Tac Yage mix. A straight crossfade takes us into the second track, and this is back into the melancholic synth vibe of the 4th Mind Maps. A touch of orbital in the pads maybe, quite gentle down-tempo drum machine beats. This is a pensive, thoughtful track, a sharp turn after the opening banger. Whispered voice and atmospheric sound forms a closing environment. Sundial Aeon, Stillness of the Morning Yage mix. The dark vibe continues unabated with the spoken word intro and grim, windy synths opening this remix. Sundial Aeon's heavy-going sci vibe always leads to excellent apocalyptically dramatic Yage remixes, and this is no different. Big slow drums, a minor key 303 line, some huge pads. Interestingly, it builds to something of a climax with some reverb-soaked melodic lines around the halfway mark, bringing us a lengthy ambient outro. The pairing of Yage and Sundial Aeon actually really reminds me of the music of carbon-based lifeforms. Some 1994 environments close and lead into the following track. Info, Symbiotic Frequencies Yage mix. While the minor key mood remains, this track has a very different vibe to the previous couple, with faster beats heading into chirpy IDM with skittering, tinny rhythms. Spoken samples carry over into the following track. Pentagrams of Discordia, In the Sky Above. Oh, well, this is a touch different. slow hip-hop beats start here. This kind of beat within an IDM context screams Boards of Canada, and yes, that's definitely the vibe on this track. A lot more reverb than they usually use, synths slightly less woozy, but the influence is strong. I really don't like Boards of Canada. That probably gives an idea of my feelings on this track. And as in last, Enofa Yage mix. 70s hauntological synth at the start pose the question of whether we're heading into Electric Brainstorm's territory. Well, somewhat. The beat is punchier than what we get on those mixes, but this is very Ghost Box friendly material. Drun Encode 3 Yage mix. Now I know it's encode, I'm just being facetious. A rather disturbing sample from the movie The Shadow, a dream of tearing skin off of a face, brings us back into IDM territory for this spiky drone track. Energetic beats, dark synth lines, it's all over a touch too quick in 3 minutes. Enofa Receiving Signals Yage mix. Another of my tracks gets a remix. I somehow managed to predict the mood of the album by providing one of my darkest tracks, which is given a much more oppressive overhaul by Yage. Over my mangled 808s and gloomy bass are monolithic layers of grinding rhythms, swirling synth sweeps, a bunch more samples and a ton of reverb. The door slam that closes the original features a few dumps throughout, adding a heavy going feel, while digital noise and glitches bring further intimidating vibes. The feature sound of London viewed from the middle of a lake. The first Fuse track in 5 years, the piano pieces having seemingly moved away from that series, this is a particularly gorgeous one. Almost devastatingly sad piano chords and synth melody creating a feeling of stillness over subtle gurgling sounds. One of my favourite Fuse pieces. It almost closes with the first CD's answer phone message, but after the beep is a single breath and then it's gone. Feature sound of London, Cold Ditch. Oh well, there's a lovely title. Fast electronic beats, melancholic synth strings, it's all pretty familiar but continues the downbeat mood of the album overall in an impressive way. The strings actually play a pretty gorgeous melody that makes this an incredibly evocative example of this particular style. Yage, a perfect sound. Once again, Yage isn't providing much of a different style here. This features some field recordings previously heard on Supercontinents before shifting into some ambiguous sounding rising analogue synth lines. Spacey and atmospheric, but little more than a minute long. A perfect sound? I'm not sure. Another answer phone beep threatens to bring a message, but is cut off by the next track. CRC and VC118A Virga Yage mix. My overwhelming memory of the launch night for Mind Maps 5 was noting down the name CRC, as both of their inclusions were pretty great. This is a top drawer slice of electro, trademark epic synth pads and strings, catchy bass, excellent 808 work, becoming more mangled and glitched as it progresses into the Yage machine. CRC Damaged Cells Yage mix. Screeching 303s announce a very different CRC remix, this one a pounding acid banger. Just as we get a breakbeat at the halfway mark, the whole thing cuts to vocal samples from Environment, a hint of epic melody, and then back to the acid. A plucked instrument, an oud, maybe, is absolutely not the kind of closing section one would expect, so it is of course what we get. Dialed Martis Yage mix. Ever-changing bizarre beats, quite buoyant melodies, fizzling bass. This is closer to earlier Mind Maps remixes in its style. Even the minor key doesn't stop it from sounding surprisingly upbeat and playful, especially as glockenspiel notes come in. The final remix of the album. Humanoid Urban Slip Road Exit 7. In my head there's an entire folder on Brian's computer filled with Urban Slip Road tracks documenting each exit. Anyway, this is a piece in the growing midway style where pretty regular but very much not dance floor beats accompany 303s, creating a weird atmospheric acid electro sound. Lots of weird noises throughout reverb adding trademark FSOL textures. The future sound of London, Clouding of Consciousness. Also known as Fentanyl, Clouding of Consciousness. Also known as Fentanyl. Mind Maps 5 closes on an absolute epic. Clouding of Consciousness begins over the end of Urban Slip Road, a choir sample, almost certainly the same one used in Semi-Conscious Participant, forming a huge epic drone. To me, this is properly apocalyptic music again, the sound of a dramatic, world-changing event, something unknowably huge and terrifying. And then, after a couple of minutes of build-up, we get a pretty noisy synth note, throbbing bass, and pow, in comes the beat. And it doesn't disappoint, pounding in with heavy kicks, odd crackling, crunching noises, and huge metallic clangs. Everyone in the mixer room was blown away by this one when it was broadcast, and it's no surprise. At 7 minutes, its runtime does a good job matching its epic atmosphere, and it is one of the most immediately impressive FSOL tracks since the 90s. Perhaps unsurprising then that it became the opening track for the first new Future Sound London release in every year, Captures. Amazingly, it works just as well as an opener as it does a closer, the huge choral intro being a superb way of bringing in a new era of FSOL. For its inclusion on the EP, the title is extended to Fentanyl, Clouding of Consciousness, and then on the 12-inch edition, that was cut down to just Fentanyl, weirdly. Fentanyl's an opioid painkiller, which has been responsible for a large number of deaths by overdose, rather pleasantly. The version of Mind Maps 5 closes with some seemingly unrelated strings previously heard at the end of Serengeti. Music, FSOL Night 9, 21st June 2024. As usual, Mind Maps 5 launched with a full broadcast of the album on Mixlr, plus exclusive material. Once again, we've got a 30-minute warm-up, the Exhibition Hall, which again I'll cover in episode 81. After the full play of My Maps 5 came the usual announcement of the CD's availability alongside its partner album Trip Maps 2. Then we got the expected 20-minute bonus mix. This mix opens with a couple of slightly bored people having trouble in a recording studio. A dodgy headphone jack seems to have stopped a monitor from working. The first track is a Yage mix of one of my pieces, and then it becomes clear that this mix is actually a short promotional mix for Trip Maps 2, always evolving. Some slowed down tape plays for a couple of seconds before it's into the Kingsland track, Everyday Psychedelics, some watery synthy textures and odd voices follow, and then we get Trippin' by Kitsuru, and then something exclusive and utterly bizarre, synth sequences and breakbeats that sound like they're coming from another room for ages before they finally appear at full volume with some oddly glitchy rhythms over the top. Who knows what this is, but it's different and I'd like to see it appear somewhere. And a couple of minutes of delay effects to fade. FSOLDigital presents Trip Maps 2, release date 21st of June 2024. So after the first Trip Maps, self-created as a bit of a one-off experiment, the series continued because of course it did. Can't do an album without doing a bunch of sequels. As with My Maps albums, this volume shifts towards a full track list and track indexes, but actually goes a step further by being available as a download rather than just being CD only. This is entirely down to licensing. The tracks on the My Map CDs, due to their various artist nature, are owned by so many different artists and labels that to do anything more than occasional one-off CD deals would simply be too prohibitive for a label like Touched Music. Tellingly, this has no such issues, and that's because it's all in-house or close friends of the band. It's still kind of a remix album of sorts, but also not, as the majority of the tracks are just alias works. The blurb states, the second outing from Trip Maps, a psychedelic companion to the Mind Map series. This time a lot of research went into finding old 1970s and unreleased reel-to-reel tapes, in particular multi-track masters, all remixed and remastered by Yage. Which means there are some older pieces in here that have been mixed and polished for the album, and my track is a new mix by Yage. A lot of it is playing a game of Spot the FSOL track though. The cover is AI once more, and it's actually one of the more tasteful AI covers I've seen. One imagines a lot of time and tweaking went into this, rather than it being a simple prompt and done. I'd still prefer something hand-drawn or photographed though, especially for music as organic as this. The Earthbeat logo appears on the front and CD, with all 5 logos on the back. The credits feature text stating the music may contain hiss, noise, crackles. Some of this material has been sourced from old reel-to-reels and 1-inch multi-tracks from the 1970s. Ian McPherson, Keith Webb, Atto and Heavy Red Records are all thanked. First 2 are definitely real. Webb is part of the band's management company. The other 2 I'm less sure about. I'm inclined to think you might find Heavy Records in the same part of the record shop as Freaky Deek. Similarly, Swivneep appears courtesy of India Light Recordings, another supposed label with zero web presence. I fully approve of this kind of world building, by the way. It's been a while since we had this sort of thing. The sound is slightly different to that of the first Trip Maps. That was a very rhythmic set that felt like a DJ mix, whereas this is considerably more varied, with everything from analogue synth workouts to folk songs. That said, the general vibe of it being like amorphous minus the hippie stuff, warts and all production and tiresome layers of jamming and improvisation, is still very relevant here. If Trip Maps' Psychedelic World is a vague idea of what a 1997 FSOL record might have sounded like, then Trip Maps 2 feels like the natural successor to that record had they gone deeper into the sound without taking the full step into being an actual prog band. I enjoy this one a lot, with the synth and drum machine sound still being much more prominent at this point in FSOL history. An album of Yage production and mixing but with so much organic live content is once again very refreshing, especially for someone who's always adored their blend of live instruments, samples and electronics. I'd certainly recommend it for anyone who has some interest in the slightly more electronic side of Amorphous but finds the balladry and psych pop of stuff like Divinity and the Peppermint Tree painful. Kitsura, Always With Me. Spoken words about rivers of love floating, sensing, and we turn to face the sun. This is either a poem or a sample of a film, although where it's from I have no idea. Maybe it's artificially generated as a man and woman both speak it. Google has nothing. But the phrase Dance of the Sky appears on a page referencing the concept of isness, so that's interesting. Who knows? In the background there's a very quiet jam between bongos and scuzzy electric guitar. Piano comes in at the end, a very strange little intro.
Your eyes, rivers of love, free from all. We float, we sense.
Enofa, Ancient Brickwork. So the original of this appears on my album Bone More, which also features the original of My Maps 5 track Receiving Signals. This isn't a proper remix in the way many of the My Maps tracks are, but more of an update. Brian basically took all of my stems and treated them as a near-finished track, adding a few flourishes, an additional looser drum loop, some more effects, while cutting back on the secondary noisier guitar loop, and then did a new mix down. It's closer to a co-production job than a conventional remix, as it retains pretty much all the original elements and structure. Funnily enough, Nick, who runs Third Kind Records, who released the album Bone More, said the track reminded him of Amorphous, and there's probably a touch of the isness in its DNA, built largely from samples and loops of guitars, drums and so on, but assembled in an electronic manner. It signifies that Trip Maps 2 is a less hectic affair than the first part. Turbulent Space, Position On. Now, Turbulent Space is definitely an in-house track, either the pair of them or Brian solo. This isn't so far off the feeling of something like The Cartel, but with a much tighter mix. I've actually wondered whether Will White was also involved here with the very propeller-head sounding mix of chunky breaks and wah-wah guitar. Flute, electric guitar strings and other instruments appear over the top. Definitely action film score vibes here. Zen Woolley, TU. Zen Woolley is a project by Brian's significant other Lisa Bartlett. This is the first time she has appeared musically, although given that she lives somewhere that contains Brian's studio or studios, I wouldn't be surprised if she has created more over the years. It's an organic ambient piece, floating flute drones, some scraping strings, quiet reverberated percussion, and a lovely spacious piece that keeps the ebb and flow of the album going. The Magic Ashtray Band, Are You? Now this is an interesting one. The Magic Ashtray Band is an old group of Freedom Management's Keith Webb, as mentioned in the Dead Cities credits and indeed referenced on the back of Trip Maps 2. However, Are You started out, it surely was heavily remixed, as this ambient piece is not what one would expect from, well, a band. The vocals were released fairly conventional, but everything else must have gone through a lot of reverbs to create this gorgeous pillow of sound. A richly beautiful track, and probably one of the remixes on the album. I will now get a message from Brian telling me that no, this is what the Magic Ashtray Band sounded like. Cynthia A, Algebraic Topology. The 70s vibe suggests a good home for Cynthia A. As with Rivers Over Roads, this is a warm, welcoming major key synth work, a world away from Ignition of the Sun, pulsing sequences, vast pads, just really uplifting. Beautiful stuff. The full 6 minutes is earned. Yoruba. Vodun. Oh, no, what the fuck is that? Yoruba. Thank you, Brian. Yeah, this has to be a Brian track with a name like that. Birdsong links from the previous track, and then in comes some funky bass and breakbeats, followed by some proggy flute, fuzzy guitar, and bizarrely sprightly trumpet notes. I wonder if the performances here came from Amorphous sessions. The final piece differs from Amorphous by being clearly very loop based. There's no lengthy soloing here, which for me is an enormous bonus. Honestly, outside of jazz, I'd be happy if no more conventional solos on any instrument ever existed again. You can certainly do some weird, noisy guitar madness, but no noodling on your instruments. Thanks, everyone. Yage Letters. Not the Yage Letters, but Letters by Yage. Some old documentary footage of someone explaining how effects, especially ring modulators, work, and then we finally get some Yage of the Woodlands of Old pygmy variety. Muffled, tribal sounding rhythm, murky noises that aren't field recordings but have the same effect, some almost entirely percussive guitar loops, and then some of the bluesy acoustic guitar from the 2020 track Pygmy come in. That track also having musical crossovers with the track The Yage Letters. Lovely stuff, more of this project please. Kitsuru Trippin. So there's a thanks to someone or something called Atto or ATO on the sleeve for the Masters of Kitsuru. I wouldn't be surprised if elements of this may have come from older recordings, but this acoustic bossa nova track is an in-house FSOLDigital piece. The voice samples are quite lo-fi, so they might be old, I don't know, but yeah, we're going with secret alias here. Very monsterism. Some atonal piano strings or harpsichord over tambura drones lead things onto a much darker outro. Uncle Jack's Silver Ripples 1973. Well, this one's reasonably self-explanatory. This is a song by Brian's Uncle Jack. Recorded in 1973 by Bill Dougans, Brian's father, the piece has been dug up and given a once-over with some reverb, seaside field recordings and a modern mix. But the beautiful acoustic folk song remains intact and manages not to disrupt the atmosphere. Jack has a wonderful, powerful voice and the song is gorgeous. Between lots of interesting games and aliases and world building, this moment of authentic 1970s music and intimate family memories is striking and wonderful.
Silent, cold and flattered by the moon, stretched away from me so far. So soon it faded into gloom. To see immense
Woodshed, Slide or Die. Nice. Probably another FSOLDigital project. This is a fun fuzz guitar-led instrumental, again doing a pretty good job of replicating a live band. It's extremely catchy. In the middle, everything slows down to a hilariously fucked up crawl, a woman speaks, and then we return to the main track with reverse guitars on top. Fun piece. Ends with a few seconds of piano and creepy laughter. Magic Ashtray Band 3+4. Well, now I have absolutely no idea what the Magic Ashtray Band sound like. Maybe they were a 60s exotica lounge influence band on the Stereolab end of things, as that's exactly what this sounds like. Who knows? Anyway. Yage, Lilwa 5. Another track from the infamous randomly bashing the keyboard to come up with the name sessions. This is brilliantly strange. I'm getting properly 1997 vibes from the beat that doesn't really feel like it works, but somehow does, similar to Poppadom in that sense, although it's quite different in sound. Loops of percussion rolls, strange vocalisations, acoustic guitar strums, electric guitar picking, randomly stopping for moments of silence, herringalls calling from deep within an echoey cave. Superb and bizarre. 20 seconds of reverse sonic murk and clattering wood acts as something resembling a closing environment. Swivneep, Rag for Dawnlight. So this is another one that's got a credit suggesting it's a real artist that I find highly suspect. I'd imagine Rag actually means raga, and yep, it has the raga feel of a single chord and hypnotic tableau running throughout, but as always with trip maps, it's all looped rather than lengthy performances. If I had to guess, I'd say this is a new piece built out of Baluji Srivastav performances. It's a very pretty, gentle tracker, another that brings to mind the more FSOL tinged sound of some of the isness, in contrast with the jam band approach of later Amorphous. And it closes with the man and woman talking about the damaged headphone jack from the night's mix. Anayama, Threads of Your Words. Growling fuzzy bass, wah-wah guitar, some very proggy Hammond organ. This occupies pretty similar territory to Woodshed and Turbulent Space. Again, the clearly sampled and looped elements are suggestive of it being an FSOLDigital artist. After a pretty bouncy opening, it shifts into moodier territory with some sad-sounding piano arpeggios, creating a surprisingly dramatic-sounding piece in the process. Camel's Kohi House. A brief piece for looped acoustic guitar and textural electric guitar notes, and what sounds like shouting children over the top. Oh, and a theremin appears for good measure. Whimsical yet haunting. FSOL? Probably. Everyday Psychedelics. This track was previewed on YouTube shortly before the release of the album and then featured on the Touched Music bonus mix. Kingsland is a project by Brian and lifelong Glasgow friend John Goslin. As well as contributing to Z-Box recording, Goslin also appeared on top of the Pops, miming bass guitar when Brian did Stack a Humanoid, as well as playing drums on some Black Hill Transmitter material. Based on this track, a Kingsland album should be pretty good, and we can hope it'll come along one day. I know one was being worked on. Mid-tempo drums, loud bass, tons of rich synths. It's very much electronic psychedelia or psychedelic electronica. Hugely uplifting track and a great way to end the album. Well, a minute of synthy bubbles actually in the album, but you know what I mean. Pleasurefields and Yage, The Pleasure's Coming. Release date 3rd of October 2024. And on the psychedelic end of things, how's this for a weird one? Yage remixed Pleasurefields for a track that appeared on a rare lathe cut and on TripMap's Psychedelic World. The pair's next project was a collaborative track, only, well, This is a bouncy electronic pop song. Some twangy 60s sounding guitar, smooth breakbeat and vocals. There's more than a touch of Britpop to this in a strange way, in its influences at least, especially with its ba 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 bridge section. I really don't know what to make of this. There are a lot of weird gurgling synths, bizarre noises, sweeps and such going on, so yeah, it's not like the Yage influence can't be heard, but let's just say this is not conventional. It can be picked up for free or name your price download from the Pleasurefields Records Bandcamp.
I see him stressing and I find it funny, cause they don't see the road and they're looking for money. They say that I'm lost and the pain is showing, but I aim for the stars, cause I'm...
The future sound of London, Captures, release date 1st of November 2024. Now to the main event. A year after the final part of the Environment 7 trilogy and the Environment 8 gates open already. Not bad going given the last lot came after a 5-year gap. Of course, Captures isn't actually Environment 8, it's labelled as Pre-8 EP 001 or Pre-8 001 EPA on the cover, and is basically the closest thing to a lead single the band have put out since we persuade ourselves we're immortal 4 years before, and in FSOL terms the first since My Kingdom in 1996. Well, I suppose you could just about count Murmurations. The pre-order on Bandcamp described it as a sneaky EP before next year new FSOL album. Sneaky. The title, Captures, only appears on Bandcamp and the 12-inch just has its Pre-8 title because it's FSOL. It's an EP rather than a single, so while at the time it was promised one track would be on Environment 8, it remains to be seen which it is, or if that's even still happening. With rumours that Environment 8 went back to the drawing board in early 2025, this might be entirely separate by this point. It starts with Fentanyl, named Fentanyl Clouding of Consciousness on the 12-inch, which is the same as Clouding of Consciousness, the closing track from Mind Maps 5. Nemoisha Mitrokeski, FSOL Board's Pandemonium, was partly responsible here, having mentioned to Brian that the track would make a brilliant opener to a release. This was the driving force behind starting the EP with the track. The rest of the EP shifts between tracks of largely familiar sounds by this point, bleepy IDM, chugging beats, some ambience, a few field recordings. The atmosphere is pretty different though, and what feels like a slightly Dead Cities mood to the EP. Feels somewhat sedate and strangely clean, bringing to mind, well, to quote the title of track 2, Leafy Suburbs. This is very different to past environments and, while stylistically maybe a touch over familiar, brings in some always welcome variety. The cover and title suggest something photographic, perhaps that these are intended to be snapshots of particular times and places. Cover art features alongside the digitally warped camera picture, the band name as FSOL, and the 5 logos. All text on the release is in Eurostyle Extended, both standard and bold, which is nice to see. The record labels feature the band name as FSOL and the Earthbeat logo. The credits feature the intriguing copyright credit for EBV, EBP. No writing credits at all. The initial release was on blue vinyl, followed by a red repress and then a black one. It is, to the best of my memory, a couple of bonus tracks aside, the first Future Sound of London release to come out on vinyl but not CD. Captures is pretty good. On release I did make a point of it containing relatively few surprises, and honestly, all 6 tracks here could probably have come from just about any FSOL release of the previous 8 years, but the track for track quality is very high. There's only one piece here I don't especially rate, and the overall atmosphere certainly feeling somewhat refreshing. It's a difficult release to consider overall, with an unusually short runtime of 25 minutes, which makes it feel like half an album, but I do enjoy it quite a bit. Leafy Suburbs. After a lengthy and intense opener Fentanyl, Leafy Suburbs is a very welcome breather. An acoustic guitar plays a pleasant loop from which the rest of the track hangs. 2 incredibly different rhythm tracks, one squeaky, one clanking, are panned left and right, and just when things look to be heading into slightly too repetitive territory, in comes the piano and a secondary guitar line, throwing in a melodic resolution which gives the piece a real sense of relief. The whole track has a very chilled atmosphere that reflects the title reasonably well, somewhere quiet and safe and friendly. field recording of birdsong and wind chimes fades in, but honestly it's barely perceptible. And then we get the main synth melody. This is the entire piece, really. Arpeggios and twinkly melodies played on a plucked synth sound. It's on the maudlin, gloomy end of things. Not quite sad, but definitely downbeat in mood. It's a very pretty little track though, and it's unusual but very effective in its simplicity. More birdsong closes. Human Beings. I do like the reversal of the titles between these two tracks, with a beat not dissimilar to that in Leafy Suburbs and synth sounds much like those in Being Human. Human Beings keeps the EP's vibe consistent. The track develops, however, with some much darker synths that come in through a bang of reverb. Melodically, this is a very impressive piece with hugely evocative harmonies that I just find incredibly effective. Watery, chirping samples add further texture. Honestly, this is about the epitome of the could have appeared on any FSOL release in the previous 8 years end of things, but its composition is so brilliant that it proves that only a style over substance perspective should dismiss a track on those grounds alone. Excellent work and my favourite on the EP. Slow moving carcass. Why is a carcass moving? Slowly or otherwise it needs to stay still. Damn zombies. So this is the only piece on Captures I'm not enamoured by. It's a very gloomy track with raw sounding percussion of the ISDN era variety, bass guitar samples, ominous pads and various random sounds. I'm not sure why it doesn't quite work for me, but I think it might be that it shares drums and a lot of percussive samples with Fractate, and so I always mentally compare it to that track, which to me is far superior. So this always feels a bit underwhelming. Out of View. A build-up of synths and textures suggests a dramatic, epic final piece despite its short runtime. And yeah, it's definitely got that feel to it. The single chord running throughout, the unusual pattern to the rhythm, the screeching sample, it all feels like the final leg of a marathon, the end of the third act of a film, something momentous coming to a close. That it manages to achieve this in less than 3 minutes is impressive. Vinyl Crackle and field recordings close the EP. And that's your lot for this week and for 2024. Leave me your thoughts down below. Quite a range of different bits and bobs on this video, so I'd love to know what you thought of them and the video. There's also buttons which you can press, and enough people press them, some more people might even see the video. So yeah, get that algorithm working in the channel's favour. Meanwhile, I will be back next week with the second of the two pre-Environment 8 EPs, Multiple Angled Distortions, and a bunch of other bits and bobs as we enter 2025. Yep, we're practically caught up now. Only a few videos left. I really hope you'll join me then. CRC and VC118A Viagra. That's definitely not Viagra.